Little boy to millionaire. Don't get in your car. Your fiancé cut the brakes. He calls 911. The October wind tore through London like a razor, promising a brutal winter. 7-year-old Ethan Carter pressed his small frame against the cold, grimy brick wall, his breath forming tiny clouds in the frigid air. 4 months had passed since Aunt Clara's funeral. 4 months since his world had shattered completely. The outreach officers had come twice already, their stern but persistent voices echoing through his mind. Ethan, you can't keep disappearing. We need to place you somewhere stable. But Ethan remembered what happened to little Mark from the council estate when they took him away. He never came back to visit old Mr. Davies like he promised. As darkness descended over the opulent Kensington neighborhood, Ethan's desperate eyes found salvation. The Sterling Towers private car collection showroom glowed with warm, inviting light. Unlike the other grand buildings he'd passed, this one emanated something magical, heat radiating from inside, protecting priceless vehicles from London's unforgiving chill. Alexander Alex Sterling, 45 and founder of Sterling Automotive Group, was meticulously polishing his prized 1935 Duesenberg SJ Speedster. Tomorrow marked another milestone in his carefully planned life, finalizing wedding preparations with Genevieve Dubois, the stunning art curator who'd swept him off his feet 9 months ago at a high society charity auction. "Just you and me tomorrow, old friend," he whispered to the Duesenberg, unaware that small, desperate eyes watched from the shadows outside. When Alex finally left, securing the showroom with electronic precision, Ethan slipped through a loose panel he'd discovered earlier. Behind towering display cases, he created a tiny sanctuary, invisible, warm, and safe. As he curled up on a piece of cardboard, clutching his aunt's worn photograph, Ethan whispered the prayer Aunt Clara had taught him. "Please keep me safe until morning." He had no idea he'd just chosen the hiding spot that would change everything. But in the darkness outside, someone else was watching the Sterling Tower with very different intentions. The next morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the showroom's high windows. Ethan had barely slept, every sound making his heart race. But as warmth filled his makeshift sanctuary, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months: safety. The electronic showroom door hummed to life, and Alex Sterling stepped inside, his expensive cologne mixing with the scent of fine leather and polished chrome. Behind him glided Genevieve Dubois, her designer heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. "My love, show me this rare acquisition you've been so secretive about," Genevieve purred. Though her smile seemed practiced rather than genuine, hidden behind the display cases, Ethan watched as Alex's face lit up with boyish excitement. He led Genevieve to a car covered by a pristine white sheet. "Something truly special for our momentous day," he announced, pulling away the covering with theatrical flair. The restored Duesenberg gleamed like liquid midnight under the lights. Genevieve's expression flickered, just for a moment, from forced enthusiasm to calculating assessment. "It's exceedingly valuable, isn't it?" she asked, running her manicured fingers along the hood. "Irreplaceable," Alex stated, his gaze distant. "My father and I restored it ourselves when I was a boy. After the ceremony, we'll take her for a spin along the coast." From his hiding spot, Ethan watched Genevieve's reflection in the car's chrome. The woman's smile never reached her eyes, and something about her reminded Ethan of the cold-eyed woman at the soup kitchen who always watched children suspiciously. But Alex was different. The way he spoke to his cars, gentle and loving, reminded him of how Aunt Clara used to talk to her rare books. "You've been patient, haven't you, beautiful?" he whispered to the Duesenberg, polishing an already perfect surface. After they left, Ethan established his routine. During daylight hours, he remained perfectly still, practicing the hiding games Aunt Clara had taught him during their rare visits to the park. Only when darkness fell did he venture out, slipping into the executive lounge's kitchen to find scraps, always careful to take just enough to survive, never enough to be noticed. But on his third night, as he nibbled on leftover biscuits, he heard Genevieve's voice through the kitchen window, sharp and angry on a phone call. "The schedule holds, Silas. Immediately after the charity gala." Ethan froze. Something in that tone made him think of the scary documentaries Aunt Clara never let him watch. By his 5th day in the showroom, Ethan had grown bold enough to explore during the quiet afternoon hours when Alex worked in his penthouse office. He discovered that the showroom's ventilation system carried voices from throughout the tower, turning his hiding spot into an unintentional listening post. That night, sleep eluded him completely. At midnight, the showroom door's quiet hum jolted him awake. Genevieve slipped inside alone, believing herself unobserved, her phone pressed against her ear. The valuation was finalized, Silas. $75 million. Genevieve's voice carried a coldness that made Ethan shiver despite the warmth. We just need to follow through with the plan after the ceremony. Ethan didn't understand words like valuation or finalized, but he understood danger. The tone reminded him of the time he'd overheard the landlord threatening to evict them before Aunt Clara got sick. Stop worrying about details, Genevieve continued, pacing near the Duesenberg. Alex insists on showcasing this antique during the unveiling. It's truly opportune. When Genevieve finally left, Ethan remained frozen behind his boxes, his 7-year-old mind struggling to process what he'd heard. The next morning brought another disturbing scene. Through the showroom's side window, Ethan watched Genevieve in Alex's office while he stepped outside to take a business call. The woman moved with purpose, photographing documents on his desk with her phone, her movements quick and furtive. When Alex returned with tea for both of them, Genevieve was sitting innocently, her radiant smile firmly in place. "You're incredible for handling all these last-minute arrangements, sweetheart," Alex said, kissing her forehead. "Anything for our shared prosperity," Genevieve replied, her fingers trailing possessively over the papers she'd just been photographing. From his hiding spot, Ethan watched this performance with growing unease. Aunt Clara had always told him to trust his feelings about people. "Your gut often knows truths your mind hasn't processed yet, my little lion," she used to say. And right. Now Ethan's gut was screaming warnings about the woman Alex planned to marry that evening. As Ethan carefully collected condensation in a small container he'd found, he overheard Genevieve making another late-night call. 2 more days and the future is set. The certainty in Genevieve's voice sent ice through Ethan's veins. Whatever was going to happen in 2 days, Alex's charity gala, he knew it would be terrible. But who would believe a runaway 7-year-old hiding in a stranger's showroom? 2 days before the gala, Ethan was carefully eating dry biscuits he'd found in the executive lounge when the showroom door opened silently at 2 a.m. His heart hammered as Genevieve entered with a tall, thin man wearing dark clothing. "Silas?" Genevieve whispered, her voice carrying deadly satisfaction. "Everything's aligning perfectly." Ethan pressed himself deeper into the shadows, hardly daring to breathe as the strangers moved closer to Alex's beloved Duesenberg. "Alex insists on driving this beast for the unveiling," Genevieve explained, running her hand along the hood with mock affection. "He wants to take it for a ceremonial drive along the embankment, the stretch near Westminster Bridge. You know, the one that overlooks the river?" Silas nodded grimly. "Sharp turn, busy traffic. But what if someone suspects?" Who would suspect anything? Genevieve's laugh was cold as winter rain. A $75 million policy covering unforeseen incidents, a classic vehicle with a catastrophic malfunction, a regrettable, high-profile fatality. The press will devour it. Ethan's small hands clenched into fists. Even at 7, he understood death. He'd watched Aunt Clara grow weaker and weaker until the quiet stopped. But this was different. This was murder. "The hydraulic lines," Silas continued, producing specialized tools, "will compromise them, not sever. They'll function adequately for a casual drive, but the instant he demands full braking on that treacherous stretch, cataclysm." Genevieve finished with satisfaction. "I tested the route yesterday. Alex plans to take the car for one last test drive tomorrow before the gala rehearsal. That stretch past Westminster doesn't forgive mistakes." Horror filled Ethan's chest as he watched Silas crouch beside the Duesenberg's front wheel. These people were going to hurt Alex. Kind Alex, who talked sweetly to his cars and brought Genevieve tea every morning. A small wrench slipped from Silas's hand, clanging against the concrete. Both conspirators froze. "What was that?" Silas hissed. Genevieve listened intently, then shrugged. "Probably one of the building's stray cats. They get into everything." As Silas resumed his deadly work, compromising hydraulic lines with surgical precision, Ethan bit his lip to keep from crying out. He thought of Aunt Clara's voice. "Sometimes, my little lion, integrity demands more courage than you thought possible." But how could someone so small stop something so terrible? When they finally left, Ethan crept toward the Duesenberg on trembling legs. Even in the dim light, he could see the damage, fluid pooling beneath the car like dark tears. Tomorrow, Alex would take his final test drive. Unable to escape without being seen, Ethan remained frozen in his hiding spot as Genevieve and Silas methodically destroyed Alex's cherished Duesenberg. The precision of their work terrified him. This wasn't random damage, but precise elimination. "Hand me the smaller cutter," Genevieve whispered, displaying surprising mechanical knowledge as she pointed to specific hydraulic lines. "We need to weaken this section just enough when he presses hard on the brakes going downhill." Silas worked with the skill of someone who'd done this before. The pressure will drop subtly initially, then catastrophically fail under duress. It'll appear as a critical component failure. Ethan watched in horrified fascination as they drained hydraulic fluid into containers, then carefully cleaned up every trace of their presence. These weren't amateurs. They moved like ghosts, leaving no evidence except the invisible death trap they'd created. "I tested the route yesterday," Genevieve continued, her voice filled with anticipation. "Alex mentioned he wants to take it up to Hampstead Heath tomorrow morning, then down the embankment before picking up his guest of honor at the airport. That stretch past Westminster has claimed 2 vehicles in the past decade." "What about the gala?" Silas asked, sealing the hydraulic fluid containers. Genevieve's smile was predatory. "I'll be the devastated widow before I'm even technically a wife. The sympathy will be overwhelming. Local news loves tragic stories. Successful automotive mogul dies in vintage car accident the day before his company's grand unveiling." When they finished, the Duesenberg looked exactly the same from the outside. Only someone checking underneath would notice the carefully orchestrated sabotage. "Beautiful work," Genevieve said, running her hand lovingly along the car's hood one final time. "Alex always said this car was his legacy. How fitting that it will be his tomb." After they left, Ethan crept toward the Duesenberg on shaking legs. Underneath, he could see where fluid had dripped. Not much, but enough. He remembered watching mechanics work on cars near their old flat. Remembered Aunt Clara explaining how brakes kept cars from crashing. The smell of hydraulic fluid filled his nostrils, sharp and chemical. He touched the puddle with his finger, then immediately wiped it on his already dirty clothes, afraid it might be dangerous. Looking up at the magnificent car, Ethan whispered, "I'm sorry they hurt you." But tomorrow morning, Alex would climb into this beautiful death trap, completely unaware that his fiancée had just signed his death warrant, and Ethan was the only person in the world who knew the truth. Dawn broke over London with cruel beauty, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Ethan hadn't slept at all, his mind racing with impossible choices. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Alex's kind face and heard Aunt Clara's voice. "Righteousness rarely aligns with ease, my little lion." But what was the right thing for a runaway 7-year-old who'd been hiding illegally in a stranger's showroom? Through the windows, he watched Alex and Genevieve having breakfast on the executive lounge terrace. Genevieve played her part perfectly. The loving fiancé feeding him croissants, laughing at his jokes, adjusting his tie with tender care. The performance was flawless, and it made Ethan's stomach turn. "I'm eager for our life to truly begin," Genevieve purred, her voice resonating. "After your impressive display with the vehicle today, we'll be indissoluble." Alex checked his watch. "Just a quick test drive to ensure everything's perfect. Then I'll pick up Julian from the airport. He's been hounding me about the Duesenberg, since I mentioned its completion." Ethan's heart hammered. Alex planned to test the car in exactly 1 hour. Julian, his barrister, would be waiting at the airport, but Alex would never arrive. Instead, he'd be lying broken at the bottom of the Westminster embankment while Genevieve played the grieving widow. The weight of knowledge pressed down on his small shoulders like a mountain. He thought about the outreach officers, about being taken away to strangers, about the youth home Mark had described in whispered, fearful words. Everything in his 7-year-old world screamed, "Run and hide." But then he remembered Alex's gentle voice talking to his cars, the way he'd unknowingly provided him with warmth and shelter when he had nowhere else to go. He'd never even met him, but his kindness had saved his life. Could he truly sacrifice him to ensure his own anonymity? Through the showroom window, he watched Alex kiss Genevieve goodbye and start walking toward the Duesenberg, keys jingling in his hand. His face glowed with anticipation. He genuinely loved that car, loved his fiancée, loved his carefully planned life, a life that would end in 15 minutes if Ethan stayed hidden. With a courage that would have made Aunt Clara proud, Ethan made his choice. He couldn't save himself and let Alex die. Some things mattered more than being safe. Taking a deep breath that tasted like motor oil and morning air, he stepped out from behind the display cases for the first time in over a week. Alex Sterling said goodbye to Genevieve with a tender kiss and walked toward the showroom, spinning, his keys around his finger like a man without a care in the world. The morning sun caught the metal, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the polished floor. Gathering every ounce of courage his small body possessed, Ethan burst from the side access and ran across the pristine floor, his bare feet slipping on the polished surface. "Mr. Sterling, sir, stop! Don't enter your car!" he shrieked, his raw voice tearing through the tranquil morning like an alarm. "The elegant lady tampered with it last night." Alex froze mid-step, completely stunned by the apparition racing toward him. A tiny boy with tangled hair wearing clothes that had seen better days, his eyes wide with desperate urgency. On the executive lounge terrace, Genevieve's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the white marble with a sound like breaking bones. Dark liquid spread across the stone like spilled blood. "Don't drive the classic car. They intend you harm," Ethan continued, stopping just out of arm's reach, but pointing directly at Genevieve, who was now rushing down the terrace steps with alarm painted across her features. "My dear, who is this boy?" Genevieve's voice conveyed impeccable concern, but her eyes burned with barely masked rage. "We must summon security at once. He's clearly a vagrant." Alex's business instincts, honed by years of reading people in high-stakes situations, kicked into high gear. The child's terror was genuine. No 7-year-old could fake that level of fear. But more disturbing was something in Genevieve's reaction, a flash of panic before the concerned mask fell into place. "They severed the lines beneath your magnificent car, the man in black and the woman with exquisite taste. They planned for you to crash at the perilous bend." Ethan continued, his voice shaking but determined. "This is preposterous," Genevieve hissed, her flawless facade momentarily cracking. "Alex, he's clearly delusional. We need to contact the authorities and have him removed from the premises." But Alex was studying Ethan's face, seeing something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't the rambling of a disturbed child. This was testimony delivered with the precision of someone who'd witnessed something horrific. "What's your name, young man?" he inquired softly, disregarding Genevieve's increasingly desperate protests. "Ethan Carter," he mumbled. "And I've been sheltering in your showroom because it was warm and secluded. But your car isn't safe. Please, don't drive it." Alex pulled out his phone with steady hands. "I'm calling 999, he announced, his voice calm but deadly serious. "I want both police and an automotive engineer here immediately." Genevieve's face drained of color, becoming chalk white. "They tampered with your classic car to cause a collision," Ethan insisted, maintaining his distance while pointing an accusing finger at Genevieve, who approached with a smile that failed to reach her eyes. "My dear boy, someone clearly needs to call social services," Genevieve stated, her voice saturated with feigned concern. "This unfortunate child has obviously been living rough. He's likely disoriented from hunger and exposure." Alex noticed how Genevieve positioned herself between him and the Duesenberg, blocking his path to the car. Her body language spoke volumes, protective, defensive, almost territorial. "Alex, we can't take the word of a homeless child who's been trespassing on our property," Genevieve continued, her tone becoming more urgent. "He could be mentally unwell or fabricating stories for attention." But Ethan stood his ground, trembling yet determined. "I saw them with their instruments. The menacing man called Silas and the elegant lady who feigns affection. They said, $75 million when you perish. The specificity of that number hit Alex like a physical blow, his life insurance policy information that only Genevieve and his barrister knew. His instincts, which had built an automotive empire, from nothing, screamed danger. I'm calling 999, he repeated, his thumb already dialing. We'll let the professionals sort this out. Alex, please. Genevieve's mask slipped further, revealing something desperate underneath. You're really going to trust some vagrant child over your own fiancé after everything we've built together? If there's nothing wrong with the car, then there's no harm in having it checked, Alex replied with businessman's logic, the phone already ringing on the other end. Genevieve's face cycled through emotions, panic, anger, calculation. You're embarrassing us both. What will people think when they hear you called the police because a homeless child told you ghost stories? But Alex was already speaking to the dispatcher. I need police and a certified automotive engineer at Sterling Tower, Unit 1A, immediately. I have reason to believe my vehicle has been sabotaged. The color drained from Genevieve's face like water down a drain. In that moment, Ethan saw something that terrified him more than hunger or cold ever had. The look of a cornered predator realizing the hunt had gone wrong. You'll deeply regret this, Alex, Genevieve hissed so softly only Ethan heard. Both of you. As sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with each passing second, Ethan pressed closer to Alex's protective presence, sensing that the real danger was just beginning. While they waited for emergency responders, Ethan's adrenaline finally began to fade, leaving him shaking like a leaf in an autumn storm. The magnitude of what he'd done, revealing himself after hiding for nearly 2 weeks, crashed over him in waves. It was so cold out there, he murmured to Alex, bracing for reprimand. Your showroom was warm and secluded. I barely touched anything, I swear. Instead of anger, Alex's expression softened with something Ethan had rarely seen. Genuine compassion. Mrs. Gable, he called to his housekeeper, please bring hot chocolate and a thick blanket. Genevieve watched this exchange with barely concealed fury. Alex, you're condoning a trespasser. He's been pilfering from us, invading private property. We should prosecute. He's 7 years old, Alex countered firmly, his protective instincts fully aroused. The police arrived within minutes, followed by Mr. Henderson, a veteran automotive engineer Alex had specifically requested. Inspector Davies, an astute woman in her 40s with a sharp Scottish accent, took immediate control of the scene. Let's start with the vehicle inspection, she announced, directing the engineer toward the Duesenberg. Genevieve made one final desperate play. Inspector, this child is clearly disturbed. He's been living illegally on our property, probably taking food and... Ma'am, I'll need to speak with everyone individually, Inspector Davies interrupted. But first, let's see what Mr. Henderson finds. The engineer's examination took less than 10 minutes. When he emerged from beneath the Duesenberg, his face was grim. The hydraulic system has been deliberately compromised, he declared. A professional operation designed for catastrophic failure under critical braking. This vehicle was a death trap. The silence that followed was deafening. There's more, Inspector Davies added, consulting her tablet. Mr. Sterling, your exterior security cameras were disabled yesterday evening, but the showroom cameras remained operational. We'll need to review that footage immediately. Genevieve's face drained of color, becoming chalk white. This is absurd. You're going to accept the tale of a street child and leap to these outlandish conclusions. But Alex was no longer listening to her protests. He was fixated on the woman he intended to marry, perceiving a complete stranger where his fiancée once stood. Inspector Davies, he said quietly, I think you're going to find that footage very interesting. Genevieve took an involuntary step backward, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. The showroom security footage played on Inspector Davies' tablet with devastating clarity. Genevieve and Silas moved through the frames like actors. In a noir film, their sabotage captured in high-definition detail. That's preposterous, Genevieve stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. Those cameras were meant to be... She caught herself, but too late. Meant to be what, Ms. Dubois? Inspector Davies asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Realizing her mistake, Genevieve made a desperate break for the door. Two officers intercepted her before she reached the driveway, her designer heels skidding on the polished concrete as she struggled against their grip. "You don't comprehend," she wailed, her composure utterly fractured. "I was entitled to everything he possessed. Do you grasp the lengths I went to just to reach this point?" Alex stood frozen, watching the woman he'd planned to marry transform into someone utterly unrecognizable. The gentle fiancée who brought him morning tea had vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Ms. Dubois," Inspector Davies continued. "Or should I say, Ms. Moreau?" Genevieve's struggles ceased instantly. "How did you—" "Camille Moreau," Inspector Davies explained to Alex, who looked completely bewildered. "Wanted for questioning in connection with a notorious art forgery ring in Paris 3 years ago. Your fiancé has quite an interesting background." The revelations kept coming like hammer blows. Jean-Luc Moreau died in a studio fire just 8 months after marrying Ms. Moreau. She collected $2 million in insurance before disappearing. Ethan pressed closer to Alex, overwhelmed by the adult drama unfolding around him. He'd saved Alex's life, but the woman who tried to kill him was staring directly at him with pure hatred. "You insignificant urchin," Genevieve snarled, her elegant mask utterly obliterated. "You have no conception of what you've cost me. Years of meticulous planning, months of perfecting the devoted partner, all demolished by some filthy little thief." Inspector Davies stepped between them protectively. "Ms. Moreau, you're under arrest for attempted murder, grand fraud, and conspiracy. We'll also be reopening the Moreau case." As the officers led Genevieve away, she twisted back toward Alex. One final time. "You were never truly worthy of me anyway," she spat. "Just another isolated, wealthy man yearning for validation." The showroom fell silent except for the distant sound of police cars driving away. Alex sank onto a nearby display stool, the weight of betrayal and near-death settling over him like a heavy blanket. Ethan approached cautiously, his small hand touching his arm. "I'm sorry the elegant lady was so cruel to you," he whispered. Alex looked down at the brave little boy who'd saved his life, and for the first time in hours, he managed a genuine smile. In the days following Genevieve's arrest, the story exploded across London's media landscape. Automotive mogul saved by street boy dominated headlines. But Alex canceled all interviews and public appearances. His priority wasn't managing public relations. It was ensuring Ethan's safety and well-being. The penthouse, once sterile and designed for impressing investors, began transforming. Where minimalist furniture had created cold, perfect spaces, Alex found himself adding warmth. Soft blankets, books with colorful pictures, and a small table where Ethan could eat meals without feeling lost in the vastness. "I've never had a proper breakfast outside of a shelter," Ethan confessed on his 3rd morning, syrup coating his chin as he attacked the stack Mrs. Gable had prepared. Alex watched him eat with fascination. His meticulously structured life had functioned with precision for years, board meetings, market forecasts, intricate mergers. Now he found himself navigating the delightful disarray of childhood. Inquiries before he'd even finished his morning tea, small hands leaving smudges on every polished surface, and the continuous hum of someone who perceived the world through a lens of pure curiosity rather than calculated assessment. The investigation revealed Ethan's tragic circumstances. Orphaned when his Aunt Clara died 4 months earlier, he'd been evading outreach services out of fear. His aunt had briefly lost custody years before due to a bureaucratic mix-up, leaving 7-year-old Ethan terrified of being separated from the only family he'd ever known. The authorities have located a distant uncle in Birmingham, Outreach Officer Helen Miller explained during a meeting in Alex's study. Ben Carter expressed keen interest in taking guardianship. Alex's protective instincts flared immediately. "Has this man been vetted? Does he have experience with children?" "He's passed initial background checks," Miller replied carefully. "But we always prefer family placement when possible." That evening, Alex found Ethan in the guest room, carefully folding his few possessions into the same plastic bag he'd carried when hiding in his showroom. "You don't have to pack yet," he said gently, sitting on the bed's edge. The outreach officer said it would be several weeks before any decisions are made. Ethan looked up with eyes far too old for his 7-year-old face. "It's all right, Mr. Sterling. I always knew I couldn't remain. No one ever keeps me for long. The resignation in his voice broke something inside Alex's chest. This courageous little boy, who jeopardized everything to protect a stranger, had learned to anticipate displacement as instinctively as breathing. "Ethan," he said carefully, "what if there was another option? What if I applied to become your guardian?" His eyes widened with hope and disbelief. "You'd genuinely want to keep me even though I trespassed in your showroom and took some food. Particularly because you demonstrated such bravery to save my life," Alex responded, surprised by the conviction in his own voice. "If you wish to reside here, I too wish for you to stay." For the first time since he'd known him, Ethan smiled. "Truly?" And Alex realized his carefully planned life had just taken the most important detour of his 45 years. 2 weeks after Genevieve's arrest, the full scope of her deception began unraveling, like a carefully woven tapestry pulled apart thread by thread. Inspector Davies visited the penthouse on a gray Thursday morning, her expression grim as she spread files across Alex's dining room table. "What we've unearthed about Camille Moreau is deeply troubling," she began, opening a substantial dossier. "The Paris forgery ring was merely the prelude. We've uncovered a pattern extending over a decade." Alex studied the photographs and documents while Ethan sketched nearby, his presence a constant reminder of how close he'd come to becoming another statistic. The evidence painted a chilling picture of calculated predation. 3 elaborate schemes, targeting prominent figures, Inspector Davies continued. Jean-Luc Moreau in Paris died in a studio fire 8 months after their union. Robert Sterling in New York vanished from his yacht during what appeared to be a romantic evening cruise. Lord Alistair Finch in London narrowly escaped when his solicitor grew suspicious and engaged a private investigator. Each case followed an identical pattern. Camille would meet her targets at prestigious events or exclusive gatherings, present herself as a successful professional, pursue a whirlwind romance, and push for quick engagement. The deaths, when they occurred, always appeared accidental and happened after substantial life insurance policies had been established. The scary part, Inspector Davies added, is how thoroughly she researched each target. She knew their business histories, their family situations, their vulnerabilities. This was no coincidence. These individuals were meticulously targeted. Alex felt a chill remembering how perfectly Genevieve had seemed to understand his interests, his loneliness, his desire for family. Every conversation, every shared moment, every intimate detail had been calculated manipulation. The media attention intensified as the investigation expanded. News vans lined the streets of Kensington. Reporters shouted questions whenever Alex left the penthouse, and social media buzzed with speculation about the phantom artisan of the global elite. Alex hired additional security and had his barrister issue statements. But the circus continued. More troubling than public scrutiny was the private shame eating away at Alex's confidence. How had someone so successful in business, someone who built an automotive empire through reading people in high-stakes situations, been so completely fooled? "I pride myself on my discernment of human character," he confided to his trusted friend and barrister Julian Thorne during a late-night discussion in his private study. "I've brokered multi-million-pound acquisitions, uncovered intricate corporate espionage, exposed deceitful rivals. How could I have overlooked something so blatant?" Julian, who'd flown in from New York immediately after hearing the news, poured himself another scotch. "Because she was a virtuoso, Alex, this was her vocation. You were seeking companionship, not scrutinizing a criminal mastermind." The psychological impact extended beyond wounded pride. Alex found himself questioning every interaction, every decision, every instinct that had once seemed reliable. Sleep became elusive as his mind replayed moments with Genevieve, searching for signs he'd missed, warnings he'd ignored. Meanwhile, Ethan adapted to penthouse life with the resilience of childhood. But his own trauma surfaced in unexpected ways. He hoarded comfort items in his room, meticulously checked access points before resting, and sometimes woke crying from nightmares about the elegant lady returning. "She was incandescent with rage when they took her away," Ethan murmured during one of these midnight episodes, clinging to Alex as he reassured him. "What if she escapes and tries to harm us?" These fears weren't entirely unfounded. Genevieve's barrister had requested bail, arguing that his client posed no flight risk. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, and the possibility of her temporary release, however remote, added another layer of anxiety to an already stressful situation. The custody situation grew more complex as well. Ben Carter, the Birmingham uncle, had begun calling persistently and expressing heightened interest in taking Ethan. During their video calls, he seemed pleasant enough, a middle-aged construction worker with no children of his own. But something about his sudden enthusiasm struck Alex as opportunistic. The publicity has been substantial, Outreach Officer Helen Miller observed during another meeting. A lot of people are suddenly interested in Ethan's welfare. The implication was clear. Some of that interest might be driven by potential media contracts, documentary rights, or mere notoriety rather than authentic concern for a traumatized child. As Alex tucked Ethan into bed one evening, he looked up at him with those wise, worried eyes. "Mr. Sterling, if the elegant lady is released, will you still want to keep me, even if it's perilous?" The question cut straight to his heart. Was he being selfish trying to adopt Ethan? Would he be safer with relatives far from London, away from the media attention and the lingering shadow of Genevieve's threats? But looking at this brave little boy who'd risked everything to save his life, Alex knew his answer with absolute certainty. "Ethan, absolutely nothing in this world could deter me from wanting you as my family. We will confront whatever arises together." Outside, rain began pelting the windows like tiny fists. And somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed through the London night. 1 month after Genevieve's arrest, Silas Blackwood was released on bail due to a critical procedural flaw in his detention order. His barrister had successfully argued that evidence obtained during the initial search was inadmissible, creating enough reasonable doubt to secure his temporary freedom while awaiting trial. The news hit Alex like a physical blow when Inspector Davies called at 6 a.m. on a stormy Tuesday morning. "We've assigned additional patrol units to your neighborhood," she assured him. "But Blackwood is legally required to stay away from you and Ethan. He's fitted with a tracking tag and cannot exit Greater London without authorization." Alex knew that legal requirements meant little to desperate criminals. Silas had watched his entire future crumble because of Ethan's testimony. Desperate people did desperate things, a lesson Alex had learned all too well. The penthouse security system received immediate upgrades: motion sensors, reinforced locks, panic buttons in every room, and 24-hour monitoring. Alex hired private security guards who rotated shifts, ensuring the property was never unprotected, but Silas proved more cunning than anyone anticipated. The storm that Tuesday night was particularly fierce, with winds strong enough to knock out power lines across London. The tower's backup generators kicked in automatically, but the electrical disruption temporarily disabled several exterior security cameras, a window of opportunity Silas had apparently been waiting for. Alex and Ethan were awakened at 2 a.m. by the soft chime of their security system's intrusion alert. Alex's phone displayed a silent alarm indicating motion in the lower level, but the affected cameras showed only static. "Stay close to me," Alex whispered to Ethan, who was already trembling at his side. They'd practiced this scenario multiple times, but facing real danger felt entirely different. Moving carefully through the dark hallway, Alex guided them toward the safe room he'd had installed, a reinforced space with independent communication systems and supplies to last days, if necessary. But as they reached the staircase, they heard the unmistakable sound of someone moving through the penthouse below. Silas's voice echoed from the main floor, distorted by rage and desperation. "I know you're here, you meddling whelp. You and your privileged protector ruined everything." Alex's security training kicked in. The panic button in his pocket would summon police immediately, but response time in this storm could be 15 minutes or more. The safe room was their best option. But reaching it required crossing an exposed area where Silas might see them. "I have nothing left to lose now," Silas roared, his voice drawing nearer. "Genevieve is confined. My life is decimated, and it's all because some impoverished boy couldn't keep to himself." Ethan pressed against Alex's side, his small body shaking with terror. But when he spoke, his voice carried surprising steadiness. "Mr. Sterling, I know, a different route." During his weeks exploring the penthouse, Ethan had discovered passages and spaces that even Alex didn't know about. Behind a hidden panel in the penthouse study was a narrow service duct that connected to disused staff quarters. From the tower's original construction. "It's really small," he whispered, "but we can hide there until the police come." Trusting him completely, Alex followed Ethan's lead through the hidden passage. The space was cramped and dusty, clearly unused for decades, but it was invisible to anyone who didn't know it existed. They could hear Silas moving through the penthouse systematically, checking rooms, growing increasingly frustrated. Glass broke somewhere downstairs, probably a vase or picture frame thrown in anger. "They've got to be here somewhere," he muttered, his voice carrying up through the old walls. "The cars are in the showroom. The security lights are on." The tracking tag that was supposed to track Silas apparently hadn't prevented him from reaching the penthouse. Either he'd found a way to disable it, or the storm was interfering with the signal. For 20 agonizing minutes, they waited in the narrow space while Silas searched the penthouse. Ethan remained remarkably calm, his survival instincts honed by months of hiding. He showed Alex how to position himself to avoid creaking floorboards, how to control his breathing to minimize noise. "You possess remarkable fortitude," Alex whispered, astonished by this child who'd already endured more hardship than most adults ever confronted. "Aunt Clara always said, 'Fear and bravery are not mutually exclusive,'" Ethan responded quietly. "You can embody both simultaneously." Finally, they heard sirens approaching through the storm. Red and blue lights flashed through the hidden room's tiny window as police vehicles surrounded the tower. Silas's voice turned savage. "This isn't finished. Do you understand? This isn't finished." There was a crash, followed by shouting, then the distinctive sound of a struggle. Heavy footsteps moved through the penthouse, this time accompanied by police radios and authoritative voices. "Clear upstairs," someone called out. "Suspect in custody," came another voice. When Inspector Davies's familiar voice called their names, through the penthouse intercom system, Alex and Ethan finally emerged from their hiding place. They found Silas handcuffed in the main foyer, his tracking tag clearly visible and clearly still functioning. "How did he get past the security perimeter?" Alex demanded. Inspector Davies' expression was grim. "He exploited the adverse weather to approach from the concealed service tunnel. Gained entry via your private underground access during the peak of the storm. We didn't think anyone would be crazy enough to attempt it in these conditions." But Silas had been exactly that crazy. Desperate enough to risk everything for revenge against a 7-year-old child who'd simply tried to save an innocent man's life. As they led Silas away, this time with additional charges, including breaking and entering, stalking, and violating bail conditions, he twisted back toward Ethan one final time. "You should have remained insignificant, boy," he snarled. "Some truths are worth ending lives for." Alex pulled Ethan closer, both of them understanding that while this immediate threat was over, the trauma would linger, but they'd faced it together. And somehow that made all the difference. In the morning, Inspector Davies would tell them that Silas's bail had been permanently revoked and that he'd likely face federal charges for the tracking tag violation. The immediate danger was over, but for now, as storm winds howled outside and emergency vehicles departed, Alex and Ethan sat together in the library, both grateful to be alive and safe, and both understanding more clearly than ever that they needed each other. 4 months after that harrowing night in the secret passage, Ethan faced his greatest ordeal yet, testifying in court against Genevieve and Silas. The royal courts of justice loomed like a fortress of marble and glass, its imposing architecture designed to inspire respect for justice. But to a 7-year-old boy, it felt more like a mountain to climb. Alex had spent weeks preparing him for this moment, working with victim advocates and child psychologists to ensure he understood what would happen. They'd practiced in mock courtrooms, role-played with friendly barristers, and discussed how telling the truth, even when it was scary, was the most important thing he could do. "Remember, Ethan," Crown Prosecutor Eleanor Vance explained during their final preparation session, "you just need to tell what you saw and heard. Don't worry about anything else. Mr. Sterling will be right there in the courtroom, and I'll be asking the questions." But knowing what to expect and actually facing it were entirely different experiences. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal observers, and spectators drawn by the sensational nature of the case. Genevieve sat at the defendant's table, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit and a single, striking diamond pendant, appearing every inch the discerning art curator rather than the calculating fraudster she'd proven to be. Her transformation was so complete that Ethan had to look twice to recognize the woman who'd sabotaged Alex's car. Silas, facing charges in a separate but interconnected trial, would testify later as part of a formal plea agreement. His barrister had negotiated reduced charges in exchange for his complete cooperation, a development that had added another layer of complexity to an already intricate case. When Ethan's name was called, the courtroom fell silent. Alex squeezed his hand as he walked toward the witness stand, his small figure dwarfed by the formal proceedings around him. The bailiff had to adjust the microphone down to his height, and the judge spoke in gentle tones that seemed almost out of place in the austere setting. "Ethan, do you comprehend that you are here to convey the truth about what you witnessed and overheard?" Judge Evelyn Chambers asked gently. "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan replied, his voice barely audible despite the microphone's amplification. Prosecutor Vance began with simple questions about Ethan's background, establishing how he'd come to be living in Alex's showroom. Ethan's answers were clear and honest, describing his Aunt Clara's death, his fear of youth care, and his desperate search for shelter during London's harsh autumn weather. "And what did you hear on the night of October 15th? Vance continued. Ethan's voice grew stronger as he recounted the conversation between Genevieve and Silas. The elegant lady stated $75 million when Mr. Sterling perished. She declared the vehicle would crash at the treacherous bend and it would appear as an unforeseen malfunction. Genevieve's barrister, a sharp-dressed man named Bartholomew Finch, objected frequently, arguing that a child's testimony was unreliable. But Judge Chambers overruled most objections, noting that Ethan's account had been corroborated by physical evidence and security footage. The most difficult moment came when Finch cross-examined Ethan, attempting to confuse him about dates and times, suggesting he might have misunderstood what he heard. "Isn't it conceivable, Ethan, that you were disoriented by hunger and fear, and perhaps fabricated some of these exchanges?" he inquired with a practiced gentleness that held a distinct undercurrent of disdain. "No, sir," Ethan replied staunchly. "I know precisely what I heard. They intended to harm Mr. Sterling, and that was abhorrent." His simple moral clarity cut through the legal complexity like a knife. In that moment, everyone in the courtroom, jury, spectators, even the defense team could see the absolute truth in his testimony. When Finch suggested that Ethan might have invented the story to gain attention or sympathy, he looked directly at him with those wise, serious eyes. "I wished no one to know of my presence," he said softly. "I was terrified they'd remove me from Mr. Sterling, but I could not allow the elegant lady to hurt him. My aunt taught me that rectitude surpasses personal safety." The impact of his words was visible throughout the courtroom. Several jurors wiped their eyes, and even the court. Reporter paused in her transcription. But Genevieve wasn't finished. As the prosecution rested its case, she made a decision that shocked everyone, including her own barrister. Against all legal advice, she insisted on taking the stand in her own defense. What followed was a performance that revealed the true extent of her narcissism and manipulation. Rather than expressing remorse or attempting to minimize her actions, Genevieve launched into a bitter justification of her crimes. "You seek the truth," she spat, her facade finally crumbling entirely. "These men were born with every advantage, immense wealth, effortless triumph, societal deference. While individuals like myself had to claw for recognition, Jean-Luc Moreau inherited his fortune. Robert Sterling merely benefited from fortunate investments. Alexander Sterling constructed his empire on concepts he likely plagiarized from more brilliant minds." The courtroom listened in stunned silence as she continued, her rant revealing a worldview twisted by entitlement and rage. "I offered them precisely what they craved, a sophisticated companion who elevated their self-worth. In return, I was entitled to their vast fortunes. If they proved overly trusting, too unsophisticated to safeguard their own interests, that was their inherent flaw, not my transgression." Her barrister tried desperately to stop her testimony, but Genevieve was beyond control. Years of suppressed anger poured out in a torrent of self-justification that destroyed any remaining sympathy the jury might have felt. And that insignificant little thief, she added, pointing directly at Ethan, should have remained invisible. Children are to be observed, not heard, particularly those from the streets with no claim to meddle in adult affairs. Judge Chambers had to gavel for order as murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Alex's hands clenched into fists, his protective instincts screaming at Genevieve's attack on Ethan. But Ethan himself remained calm, looking at Genevieve with something approaching pity. "She is consumed by fury," he murmured to Alex after they left the Royal Courts of Justice that day. Aunt Clara always said those consumed by anger often inflict pain because they have first endured it. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Genevieve was found guilty on all counts: attempted murder, grand fraud, conspiracy, and multiple charges related to her prior illicit activities. The judge sentenced her to 30 years in His Majesty's prison without possibility of parole for 20 years. As Genevieve was led away in handcuffs, she maintained her defiant demeanor until the very end. "This is not justice," she shrieked. "This is the relentless persecution of a woman who refused to be exploited." But her words fell on deaf ears. Justice had been served not through revenge or hatred, but through the simple courage of a little boy who chose to do what was right, even when it was terrifying. Outside the Royal Courts of Justice, as media cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, Alex lifted Ethan into his arms. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Ethan nodded, then smiled. The first truly carefree smile he'd seen from him since this ordeal began. "Can we go home now, Mr. Sterling?" "Yes," he replied, his voice thick with profound emotion. "Let's go home." 1 year after that fateful October morning, when a desperate little boy emerged from a showroom to save a stranger's life, the Sterling Tower penthouse had transformed beyond recognition. Where once stood austere displays designed to impress potential investors, warm, inviting spaces now truly facilitated life. The stark modern furniture that had previously filled every room ceded its place to plush sofas, ideal for sharing adventure stories. Ethan's sketches adorned the custom refrigerator, vibrant pencil drawings of figures labeled Dad, Alex, and Ethan, which held more significance to him than any industry accolade he'd ever acquired. The formal dining room, previously used only for client entertainment, now hosted homework sessions, puzzle competitions, and the occasional food fight that Mrs. Gable pretended to disapprove of while secretly smiling. But perhaps the most dramatic change was in Alex himself. The driven executive who once worked 16-hour days now left the office at 5 sharp, prioritizing go-karting practice over conference calls and bedtime stories over earnings reports. His assistant had initially worried about this dramatic shift in priorities, but Sterling Automotive Group's performance had actually improved under his more balanced leadership. "It appears," he confided to his trusted executive team during a rare late-night strategy session, "that having something infinitely more valuable than work actually enhances one's professional acumen, rather than detracting from it." The legal proceedings had finally concluded with satisfying resolution. Genevieve received 30 years in federal prison, while Silas, who had provided comprehensive cooperation with prosecutors, was sentenced to 10 years for his complicity in the conspiracy. Both would serve their time far from London, ensuring Ethan's safety and peace of mind. More importantly, the adoption proceedings had reached their joyful conclusion. After months of home visits, background checks, and psychological evaluations, Judge Patricia Williams had signed the final papers, making Ethan officially part of the Sterling family. "It is exceptional," the judge had observed during the formal proceedings, "to witness such an unequivocal instance of a child and guardian destined for one another." On this anniversary morning, exactly 1 year since Ethan had run across the showroom floor, shouting warnings about the elegant lady, Alex had planned a special celebration. He found Ethan in the breakfast nook, carefully arranging colorful sprinkles on pancakes Mrs. Gable had made in the shape of a sports car. "Today is our extraordinary day," Ethan declared with 7-year-old gravitas. "The day I rescued you, and you rescued me," Alex smiled, marveling at his capacity to perceive their bond as a reciprocal deliverance, rather than a unilateral act of benevolence. In truth, he was absolutely right. Ethan had saved him from far more than Genevieve's murder plot. He'd saved him from a life of lonely success, from relationships built on deception, from the hollow victory of achieving everything except what truly mattered. "I have something for you," Alex said, producing a slender, velvet-wrapped case from behind his back. Ethan's eyes widened with excitement as he carefully removed the ribbon, a skill he'd learned from Alex, who believed in savoring special moments rather than rushing through them. Inside was a small silver key attached to a sturdy leather cord. "What's this for?" he asked, holding it up to catch the morning light filtering through the panoramic windows of the executive lounge. "Come and see," Alex replied enigmatically, leading him through the glass doors onto the private viewing deck. There, overlooking the gleaming collection in the showroom below, stood the most remarkable observation platform London had ever witnessed. Constructed from polished steel and reinforced glass, it was spacious enough for two, yet designed with a 7-year-old's ingenuity. Complete with a retractable staircase, a high-powered telescope for observing the city skyline, and most significantly, an unobstructed view of the very showroom where their extraordinary story had commenced. "It's ours," Ethan breathed, his voice brimming with awe. "It's ours," Alex confirmed. "A place where we can forever recall how we found each other." They ascended together, Ethan clambering ahead with the boundless energy of childhood, while Alex followed more deliberately, still acclimatizing to the notion that his bespoke suits were intended for active living rather than pristine preservation. The platform interior was everything a child could imagine: built-in benches with soft cushions, shelves for books and treasured gadgets, and windows positioned to catch both sunrise and sunset. But the most special feature was visible through the main window, a clear panoramic view of the showroom where a frightened little boy had hidden until unwavering courage compelled him to reveal himself. "From this vantage point, you can always see where our journey began," Alex explained, settling beside Ethan on the cushioned window seat. "But more significantly, you can envision all the destinations we might yet reach." Beyond the showroom, the view encompassed London's skyline, the Thames with its riverboats and barges, and the distant hills that rose like promises on the horizon. It was a vista of infinite possibility, a perfect metaphor for the life they were building together. "Mr. Sterling," Ethan said abruptly, using the formal address he'd never entirely relinquished, despite Alex's gentle suggestions. "Do you think the elegant lady regrets her actions?" The question surprised him. Even after everything, Ethan's capacity for empathy remained intact, a remarkable resilience that spoke to both his aunt's influence and his own essential goodness. "I cannot say," Alex answered truthfully, "but I hope that one day she comprehends that inflicting harm never yields resolution." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up around them. River horns reverberated across the Thames, pigeons cooed to each other from the rooftops, and somewhere in the distance, the joyous shouts of children drifted from a nearby park. "I once believed," Alex said reflectively, "that true triumph lay in constructing the largest enterprise, accumulating the greatest fortune, captivating the most influential individuals. I dedicated so many years to external accomplishments that I neglected to cultivate a life truly worth experiencing." Ethan considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important conversations. "Aunt Clara always taught me that material possessions do not bring contentment. People do, and acting with integrity instills a deep sense of self-respect, even when unseen by others." The wisdom of it struck Alex with fresh force. Aunt Clara, whom he'd never met, had raised a grandnephew, capable of risking everything to save a stranger. That kind of moral courage wasn't taught in business schools or corporate seminars. It was cultivated through love, example, and the deep understanding that character mattered more than comfort. "Your aunt sounds like she was an extraordinary woman," Alex said softly. "She was," Ethan agreed. "But I think she would have approved of you. You look out for people. Your staff, Mrs. Gable, me. Aunt Clara always said, that's the true measure of a good heart." As the morning sun climbed higher, warming their special sanctuary, Alex reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, he'd been preparing to marry a woman who wanted to kill him for money. Today, he was planning a future with a son who'd saved his life simply because it was the right thing to do. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent millions on sophisticated security protocols, extensive background investigations, and ironclad legal safeguards. Yet his authentic salvation had emanated from a runaway 7-year-old with nothing but raw courage and unwavering moral conviction. "Ethan," he said finally, "there's something I want you to always remember. You didn't just save my life that day. You gave me a reason to live it." He looked up at him with those wise, serious eyes that had seen too much sadness, but somehow retained their capacity for joy. "Sometimes one must relinquish something to acquire something far superior," he said with the profound simplicity that only children possess. Alex smiled, remembering how he'd used almost exactly those words a year ago. His empty penthouse had been filled with laughter. His sterile success had been transformed into meaningful purpose. His lonely achievement had become shared adventure. Most remarkably, his carefully controlled life had been beautifully disrupted by spontaneity, wonder, and the daily chaos of raising a child who approached each day as a new opportunity for discovery. "Ready for our inaugural official day as the Sterling family?" he asked, standing and offering his hand. Ethan sprang up eagerly, already envisioning adventures in their new observation platform, already contemplating tomorrow's boundless possibilities rather than yesterday's lurking fears. "Ready," he proclaimed with a smile that could illuminate the entire metropolis. And as they climbed down from their elevated sanctuary into the showroom below, both of them understood that while their story had begun with danger and deception, it would continue with love, laughter, and the unshakable bond between a man who'd learned that family was more valuable than fortune, and a little boy who'd discovered that courage could create its own kind of magic. The showroom stood immutable in the morning light, a silent testament to the marvel that had transpired within its glass walls. But everything else, their hearts, their home, their aspirations for the future, had been irrevocably transformed by the profound realization that sometimes the most cherished family members emerge from the most unforeseen circumstances. In the distance, Big Ben chimed the hour, and Alex Sterling and his son Ethan headed inside for breakfast, their shadows intertwining on the polished path like two disparate lives that had converged against all conceivable odds, choosing, despite every compelling reason for apprehension, to construct something undeniably beautiful together. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?